Welcome to Magnify Your Message. Inspiration magnified.
Your final destination is never really where you think you're going, but if you just keep going, you're going to get to where you need to be.
Hello and welcome to Magnify Your Message, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories, strategies, and soul of those who are making a meaningful impact in the world. I'm your host, Cheryl Hunter, and today I've got a guest who's not only reshaping landscapes, but transforming lives through the power of nature. Imagine stepping into a garden that feels like a sanctuary where every plant, every tree, every intentional design choice creates a space of healing, connection, and renewal. That is the work of today's guest, John Beaudry. John is a celebrated landscape designer and environmental advocate with a lifelong passion for bringing green spaces to life. Today, we're diving into John's journey from overcoming personal challenges to discovering how nature has the power to heal, to why creating sustainable, restorative environments is a solution to some of today's biggest societal changes. Get ready to be inspired by the wisdom of a true visionary. You are going to have your heart and soul filled by today's guest and the beauty that he brings to life. Welcome, John Beaudry.
Thank you so
What,
much, Cheryl.
what a treat to have you here. Tell our listeners, who are you? What do you provide? Who do you serve?
My name is John Beaudry. I'm a landscape artist and landscape contractor. We work out of San Diego. I've worked with people all across the country, but my primary work is here. And I'm also founder of Community Green, a nonprofit that's dedicated to bringing green spaces and food production to our urban areas so that people can be connected to each other and be with each other again in nature, where it's safe to be outside and not, whether there's a pandemic or not, like an opportunity to stay connected.
Right. As we were speaking beforehand, before our conversation, our recorded conversation, I spoke to you about having grown up on a ranch in the Colorado Rockies and how much nature meant to me. And I feel that when I've been the most disconnected in life, like had the experience of not being connected to others or myself, it's when I haven't been in nature. Um, like you mentioned the pandemic, I live near the beaches in Southern California, and they had closed the beaches, which seemed crazy, scary, and very isolating. It was challenging. So, how on earth did you get into this world of being so connected with nature and wanting to provide that gift for people?
Well, I love what you said about your experience growing up, and I had a very similar experience. I grew up about 30 miles north of Chicago in a new subdivision where today, when they build a subdivision, all the houses are built all at once. Back then, it took 10 years for all the houses to be built. So there were vacant lots everywhere. There were creeks and a river nearby, gravel pits. And I was just so curious about nature. And when I realized that the giant oaks in our backyard grew from these little acorns, I started growing acorns, and I just loved it. And I asked for my first garden at 5 years old. My mom, all my siblings and my parents were from New Jersey, and they grew up in Teaneck. They were all born in Teaneck, and they moved to Chicago just before I was born, and then I was born, and um, it was my mother used to talk about my dad always having chrysanthemums all around the house back in Jersey, and I said, I want flowers, I want a garden, and I said, I want my first garden. So we put in like a banquet-sized table and banquet table-sized garden and planted rows of zinnias and marigolds, and by the end of the summer, I was looking up the flowers, and I was just totally hooked. this magnificence could come. And what tears me apart is that children today don't have that experience. So many kids never will have the experience of uh, you know, even seeing a park, or
Right.
let alone watching a seed grow and experiencing that bounty that is there in nature. And um, you know, uh, I've had an incredible life. My first job was in a garden center. I got a degree in ornamental horticulture. Uh, and when I was 25 years old, I have to add that I was gay growing up. I knew I was gay from very early on. I didn't have the words for it. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew that I was distinctly different, and I didn't fit in, and I was picked on a lot. And really, nature has always been my solace and my escape and my home. So
Yes.
when I came home tattered from school, I went out to my vegetable garden and I weeded,
Mm,
or I planted new seeds, or I did whatever there was to do, and that just connected me. Uh,
yes.
you know, then fast forward,
Can I
I'm
just say it's so beautiful what you said about how nature didn't judge. People did, but then you
right.
came home and found yourself again and
Mhm.
your self-expression.
That's a recurring theme in my life of continually refinding myself in nature, and when I'll my life will go kind of cuckoo, and I'm like, I realize, okay, I'm really not connecting with what feeds me, and and my own inner self, because in nature, like you say, all that noise goes away, and we can really be with ourselves
Yes.
and each
Gosh,
other
it's so
when we go
beautiful.
together.
Okay, continue. The image you painted about I really had an experience of be how we can personify something like Mother Nature, the mothering element of nature welcoming you to her bosom. And when you
Mhm.
had been bullied or left feeling challenged or disempowered by who you were and coming home and finding yourself in the arms, in the bosom of Mother Nature is just such a gorgeous image. Okay, please continue.
Thank you. So I want to say that in addition to um, what I did mention about myself, some of my history is that I I had a tree care business first when I was well first I started selling real estate when I got out of college, because I had roommates who were graduating computer science making 40,000, and the opportunity for me was 10,000 in my field. And uh, so I got into real estate for a while I was doing tree work. So I was a tree climber and a real and a realtor.
Wait,
And
what do you mean a
uh,
tree
the,
climber?
like I climbed trees, and I had a brush chipper, and I did it all myself. That was what I was trained to do in college, and I got my first job out of college was working for a park district, and we managed the flower beds. But in the winter, we worked as a small team and took care of the trees, and we climbed trees and pruned them. And so I absolutely love that. I could climb 100-foot trees and prune out the deadwood. uh, and I was really vital. It was really, really fantastic to um, you know, have this sense of like these trees were like reborn after pruning and thinning them, and like helping them. The Native Americans used to tend the oaks on the land to help them resist fires. They would raise the lower branches. They would they would do all kinds of things to allow the trees to become these grandfather trees that we see around on the land in California. They didn't just come on their own. They were actually helped along. And that's, we have, we're not going to come back to this later, but we have a responsibility to help nature. We need nature as much as she needs us. And my vision is that we're all connected through nature. So nature is like the theme that is um, it's what we come from, and it's where we go to. We're stardust, and we're going to go back to stardust. And and uh, they say a handful of healthy soil has more microorganisms than there are stars in the universe.
Never
There's
heard
this
that.
complex system that's out there, um, that's mirrored inside of us. We are more of that than we are ourselves. We're more of the bacteria and the fungi in our body than we are our own cells. And when we realize that we are a walking community and that every tree is not just a tree, single living tree, it's home to infinite number of organisms that our brain can't even comprehend. So there's something about being out in nature that all of those systems are working that we don't understand. And that's what's grounding us. That's what's healing us. That's what's moderating our hormones, whether we know it or not. And I think we know it because we experience it when we go into nature. So, 25, I'm climbing trees, I'm selling real estate, and I find out that I'm HIV positive. And at the time, it was a death sentence. I literally watched my friends die around me. I waited for the axe to fall for about 9 years. In 19, there was beauty and extreme sadness and pain in this. And there's so many gifts that I received. I've often said it's the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me. It reconnected me. That being given a death sentence connected me back to my passion for environmentalism, for spirituality, for getting rid of the things that aren't serving me in my life. So I filed bankruptcy. I got out of a bad relationship. I moved out of a town that I'd lived in where I went to college for 12 years and moved back to Chicago. I decided I was going to get a job at a top 10 restaurant and live a happy, free life and just do whatever I want to do in the little time that I had left. And it, was very clarifying. And, in 1993, in the spring, I got a sinus infection and I went to my doctor and he said, well, we'll put you on antibiotics. And if that doesn't work, we'll put you on IV antibiotics. And if that doesn't work, we'll do surgery. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is just a sinus infection. He's like, you don't understand. You don't have an immune system. And all of that came to pass over the course of the summer. For the whole summer, I had a nurse coming to my house administering IV antibiotics several times a week. I wasn't able to take the drug that prevented people from getting pneumonia. I had a reaction to it. So I had to take this aerosolized pentamidine and I had to sit in the phone booth once a month and breathe this fog. And I developed bronchial asthma and that turned into pneumonia. And I was in the hospital. I had literally, I was on Social Security disability. I had written my will. I had said goodbye to my family and I bought a house that would accommodate a live-in nurse. And, really thought, okay, I had like 8 great years that I didn't expect I'd have. And I thought, this is it. And, like the next month, the cocktail came out and it was 3 drugs that were put together that worked to combat HIV. And for me, I was extremely fortunate. And within about a month, I was a completely different person. I gained weight back. I gained my whole life back. I had sold my business to my employee. I had to completely start over. I wrote a letter to my clients saying, keeping with the downscaling of corporate America, I'm selling my large equipment and I'm focusing on more specialized services. I've been volunteering at the Botanic Garden. I want to, offer you more services in your garden. And I had all these people that already believed in me and that I'd already done great tree work for. And so, boom, I already had a new business. I called myself the gregarious gardener. And it was just another time of like reconnecting, but I also went into this period of like immense survivor's guilt. So many people I knew and loved died, and so many people around the world were dying. And all I had to do was think about Africa and what was happening there at the time, and I would just start to cry. And like, why am I here? What do I have to do? And what I realized is that when my life felt out of control and I had no place to belong, at the time, I have to remind you that it was not popular to be gay. It was very unpopular to be HIV positive. We were like the plague. People didn't want to come near us, didn't want to be in the same room with us. So when my life felt out of control and I had no place to belong, it was when I had my hands in the soil and my nose in the blossoms of flowers that I felt whole and connected to something so much larger than myself, that organism that's out there that lives and breathes with us. That organism is completely capable of restoring ourselves, and she's capable of restoring us because we are part of her. And when we give nature the space to 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 do what she does, to all of those processes, she goes crazy. She's abundant. When the whole movement now is restorative everything. We've gone past sustainable. We can't just sustain, we need to restore the earth. And we can do it by, that's the whole idea of community green, is that we bring natural systems into our cities to work with water and air in our cities. And why is that important? Because we have flooding in cities, and we can manage water in new ways to reduce flooding. We have increasing temperatures because of the urban heat island effect. All of the concrete and metal absorbs heat that is released in the night, so the cities don't have an opportunity to cool off at night, and they start the temperature at a higher temperature in the morning already. So then they hit the day and it gets hotter again. And it's this compounding effect that makes our cities warmer than the surrounding regional temperatures. And by bringing more green in, we get the cooling effect of plants and begin to moderate our air temperatures in our cities. And, there's also, I want to tell the story of food. About 150 or 200 years ago, 95% of people on the planet lived an agrarian lifestyle. We all participated in raising the crops that were our sustenance. It was sowing the crops, growing them, harvesting them, processing them for the winter, and over again. And it was a rough life. Crops failed. There was scurvy, malnutrition, and around 150 years ago, we had this thing called the Industrial Revolution, and factories were built, and there was a call for a better life in the cities. So people were encouraged to leave the difficult, rough agrarian lifestyle and come for a better life in the cities. And where they came was to work in factories, and they were, paid barely enough wage to pay the landlord, which was the factory owner, their rent, and required to work very long hours. And women and children worked, and workers had no rights whatsoever, and they were just basically slave laborers. Well,
The
there was a
better
whole movement.
life, right?
Mhm.
All under
A
the
better life.
guise of being a better
Better
life.
life, right?
Hmm.
And there was a movement called the Arts and Crafts movement, which was, really a rebellion to what was the cities. The people were being stripped of their humanity, and there was they asked the question, what is a good life? And they said a good life is someone who works with their hands and with natural things, makes their own furniture, makes their own things. And this crazy idea, but it actually happened in the United States, because around there was, in I think 1859, there was the Land Grant Act, and someone could go, only men could go and claim 100 acres if they grew a crop for 3 years, and it would be theirs. And they had to build their own furniture and their own houses and everything. So, that was the good life was actually happening in the United States. And people built these beautiful homes and had porches, and would gather in the evenings and sit on their porches and talk to each other. And then air conditioning came, and people closed their porches for more cool space inside, and they talked to their neighbors just a little bit less. And then the television came, and we talked to our neighbors a little bit less. And then the phone came, and we talked to our neighbors a little bit less. And then the pandemic came, and they said, don't talk to people. They're dangerous. Stay away. And then, it just breaks my heart. We found ourselves lonely and depressed. And there are children who don't even know how to say hello to another child because they're so afraid, And so, we also gathered, around markets in the past, and there were ways, and we came to wells for water, and all of that has been taken away from us. So we have an opportunity, and that's what I see. One of the things you asked me is the question, what is the what did you call it? um, I have them both here. I'm just going to say it. Um, that you're never, you think you're going somewhere, you're never usually going where your final destination is never really where you think you're going. But if you just keep going, you're going to get to where you need to be. And and um, and that's the counterintuitive thing. I think you asked me, like, what's the counterintuitive thing that I learned about like getting myself out there? That's one of them. That like thinking that it has to be a certain way is the death of anything, any vision, any dream. What I found that when I allow others to contribute and share what I have to share, that like you offering to help get my message out is a perfect example of contribution, kind of contributions that I feel I'm receiving. And that's a kind of another piece of like the counterintuitive thing that I think people and I used to look to others to make myself relevant or to be validated by them. But really the challenge is for me to be relevant, to be relevant. You be relevant. And if you're relevant, people will be curious and they'll want to know. And then they'll want to contribute. And
Do you
so
mean be
I
relevant to yourself?
be relevant to what you're bringing, like like to the conversation in the world. Like, what does the
Right.
world need? What are we, what are we all dealing with? What's going to lift us up from where we are? How do we reconnect to each other? How do we how, we've used up all the resources on the planet, really in a way that everything's running out and going extinct, and there's not going to be any fish in the ocean soon. So what are we going to do? How are we going to feed ourselves? We've got to come up with new ways, and so we have to be relevant to what's possible. And if we talk about fear and and danger and worry and concern, we're going to find more worry and concern. If we're talking about solutions and possibilities, um, others are going to be contributing to those solutions and possibilities because it's the way. It's just the natural way, I think.
There's
Uh,
an opportunity now. It seems to solve, as you're speaking about relevancy, one of the things I'm hearing is solution
mhm.
for what wants to happen, what needs to happen. And there's the challenges that we're facing collectively. I never would have put AIDS and the pandemic right next to each other with the fear and disassociation and distancing that we had in both. And then the fallout of the pandemic, including the polarity, particularly in this country, where that it seems like that distancing and separation and fear and othering, for lack of a better word, that has now kind of cemented. And as you're speaking about relevancy, I'm hearing that there's this solution we must come up with.
I
Back
think
to
the
your,
solutions are
yeah,
all there. All the solutions we need are already there. So I see my job now as the founder of Community Green. We don't need another nonprofit to do a thing. They're all out there. All the ideas are there. What we need is to call everyone's attention to what's already happening. And I assert that though I have not personally caused something to happen with Community Green, that it's a conversation that's out there that's already happening. There's an organization called Cities Alive. I'm going to the conference in November in Toronto. Toronto is the leading city in developing and implementing green infrastructure and making the lives of their citizens better through it. So what I want to do, I'm looking to create a documentary that will hype like The Biggest Little Farm, that will inspire people to want the green spaces in their own cities. And then I'm going to create that school that's going to teach them how to advocate for those green spaces in their own cities, how to go to city planning meetings when a new building's being built and say, hey, we want this building to be a green building, and if you can't do that, we want a park over here, and then also showing them the financial solutions that are already in existence that other cities have used, where we use future tax revenues in order to give the developers make their project feasible and profitable for them, and then it's a win-win for everybody. The developer gets to build a beautiful green building, the people get to live in it, the city gets to experience it. As we aggregate all of these green buildings together, another great story is, so I helped put the first green roof on City Hall in Chicago, and it was a couple 100-year-old building, I think, very old, at least 100 years old, and it took up an entire city block, and half the building is the county and half the building is the city. So we put a green roof on the half that was the city green roof, and we monitored both halves of the roofs. And we found, of course, like dramatic changes in temperature. And well, we already knew, but we proved it, that small postage stamp parcels of land in close proximity can become habitat for all kinds of insects and birds. So that, imagine raptors flying over our cities, finding, healthy food all over because, we provided the space for them. That's what I talk about when we provide nature a place to grow and a place to proliferate, that she will proliferate. And the best example of this is peregrine falcons nested on that roof, and they were on the endangered species list at the time. They bared young, and we documented all of that. And right around the same time, the peregrine falcon came off the endangered species list. So it's just I don't think that roof was that made the difference, but it's the kind of thing that it's all of the actions that happened along with that green roof that allowed that peregrine falcon to come back. So we could, nature does have the ability to restore herself, and we do know how to do it. And it's just a matter of inspiring people and teaching people how to the way to go.
As nature comes back, we come back.
We come.
And it's shocking and yet not, how we can distance ourselves from nature in such a way, like feel like, oh, how the world goes has nothing to do with me and my life. I recently was in Maui, and it was my birthday. My husband and I were going snorkeling, and we were at this beautiful area where you could get in the water, and there's some coral reefs there. And as people were getting ready to go in the ocean, they're putting on reef toxic sunscreen. And there's signs everywhere. Do not use avobenzone, oxysilates, oxybenzone, none of these things. They will all kill the reef. And I was amazed at how many people stood outside and sprayed sunscreen on to go look at the reefs that they're killing. And I thought, I was angry and sad, and then thought, I'm sure that I'm doing something just as reprehensible that I just don't know about, that's killing nature somehow. It's not them, it's not others, it's us as a species.
Mm-hmm.
And being that disconnection from, I know I was anthropomorphizing Mother Nature before, holding you to her bosom when you were a young, bullied gay boy. But it is, if we can look at Mother Nature as our mother, I think we would respond differently, or at least look at us as a piece of nature. I don't know, John. Am I soapboxing here?
No, I think it's like we're like, I think we're discovering together, that relevancy. like this is the conversation that I think we need to nurture, and have other people be having the conversation and understanding. Like, so there's a quick, I know we don't have a lot of time, but there's another story about our relationship to nature. And so for eons, we feared nature. We didn't understand it, and it was the jungle and wild animals, and we wanted to be away from it. And when we built cities, we pushed nature aside and away, And the idea of a garden was a safe place and fenced in. It's, and it was not until the whole arts and crafts movement and the conversation around that good life and everything that was happening, they started to create land grant cemeteries in the United States. And the idea of visiting our loved ones in a natural environment was a completely new thing. I think we take it for granted now that we bury our loved ones in a beautiful park, but that was not the case. They were in cemeteries in rows, and they weren't park-like settings. But like, what if, you could go and, have a, beautiful walk in the park and go visit your loved one? That would be really nice. So there are a bunch of those cemeteries around the United States that brought that forward. And then, also, as part of the Industrial Revolution, our cities began to become clogged with coal smoke, and people got iron lung and were very unhealthy. And doctors began to prescribe moving out into the country. And at the same time, trolley lines were being built in cities, and they built something like 30,000 miles of trolley lines in the first decade of the last century to take people out of the city to the country for a better life in the country. And they started building the first these apartment buildings, and that country is now our suburbs. And the first apartment buildings were these lots where they would put like 3 or 6 little houses on it, and they would be all maintained, and it was sold as come and live in a garden setting where someone else is going to maintain it for you, and you have your own little house in this little garden setting. And then, to get more space, they went to the apartment building thing. But this whole idea of being in nature was something that we began to embrace in the early turn of the 19th, 20th century. So we can continue that.
How can people
Discovery.
get involved in their own local areas in advocating for green spaces?
That's a really great question. I don't know if I have the answer. Let me think about that for a second. Well, you would want to talk with your, start going to city planning meetings and look at, get involved with local government. And there's every city is expanding right now. There's housing shortages, and we're moving out of the, we're expanding our cities and making more suburbs. We need to advocate for land planning. And there's like, if we look at Houston floods with just a regular rain. It doesn't even take anything special. But get any kind of increased rainfall, they have major flooding and hurricanes. It's terrible. You'd think in a place like that they would know, but there was no urban planning for the whole massive area in order to how to deal with each suburb. Just built its own little thing and tagged it on to the last one, and like the systems can't hold all that. So by going to the planning meetings and saying no, we're not going to have another factory put up here. We want to have a green roof on it. We want to have have it be a green building so it contributes to our city and not be something that continues the old way. We've got to start taking new. What did Einstein say? You can't solve the problem with the same thinking that you created it with.
Right.
So it's so
in
old
your
news, but it's true.
It sounds, you were speaking about counterintuitive thinking before, and it's funny how we wanted to create, it's just the thinking is so counterintuitive. Create a better life, have less nature. Wait, now we need to get more nature so that we can actually have a better life. It's like that old parable about the young man wanting to build a wonderful life for himself. So he earns money, spends all of his health and life earning more money, only to try when he's older and rich to buy health back. John Beaudry, what is wrong with us as human beings? I say that in jest, but
it's funny though, but people say, first thing they say to me, I have an answer for that. I don't have a green thumb. And I say, you know what? Give yourself a break. We aren't cultured. It's not in our culture in the United States to teach. We just don't take our kids out. A lot of parents are starting to. A lot of clients I work with are planting gardens and are intentionally engaging their children in doing this. But it isn't something that's been done, and it's not in our blood. Like in Europe, everybody plants flowers, and nobody has a problem with it. It's just natural. But we can change that. So
And
it's
so how
like
do we change that at our own homes? Uh, you know,
just start with, if you just start with a couple pots on your balcony, if that's all you've got, and just plant some seeds and let them grow and water them and let them, maybe they'll die. And then you learn what you did, and the plants are forgiving. Even if they die, you can plant another one. It goes into the compost, they're recycled, and people get so uptight about, oh, I killed a plant. Well, I always say that the only difference between an experienced gardener and an inexperienced gardener is that the experienced gardener has killed a lot more plants.
oh, that grants so much space for us
Amnesty.
to be human, right?
Yeah, right.
It's,
Yeah.
oh, what are some of
I
the,
mean, like think of me as a child. I can't, like, I killed plant after plant after plant. I had this thing where I like got this. We had an air purifier, and we had a tub that we washed it in, and it was like a bin that I thought I could put soil in and grow plants in. It had no drainage. Terrible mistake. I put one light bulb over it, not nearly enough light. It was down in the basement where it was cold. And I tried to grow seedlings. They all came up, and then they just went boom and fell over and died, like one after another. And the whole thing just died. And I was like sobbing and sobbing. And like my mother helped me rescue some of them, and we got some of them to live. And like I grew a huge vegetable garden from it. But I mean, like failure is the access to everything. It's think about riding a bicycle. You cannot ride a bicycle without falling, which is failing in our society. Failing is the way to succeed.
I grew in kindergarten. They gave each of us flower seeds, and we could take we put it into a little paper cup and could take it home once it started to sprout. And I
Mhm.
put it in the garden. And each night throughout the fall, as it got colder, I'd go put a paper bag over it and make sure that it didn't get too cold and the frost didn't get it. Now, it was too late in the season anyway, but I just didn't want it to die. And then one day, someone came, we had a gardener came. It was a
Oh no, I know what you're gonna
and
say.
pulled it all out, pulled out the weeds. And
Oh, I had that happen so many times as a kid too.
I remember weeping. Like I had babysat these little flower buds, thinking they were snapdragons, these flowers. And I thought, oh, I was gonna have a snapdragon. It would finally bloom before winter. And alas, no. But as you're speaking about the experienced gardener versus the inexperienced one, and the experienced one is simply one who's failed more. What a perfect metaphor for life, right? There's such space in that for each of us to
Mhm.
just, it grants so much space for us to fail and
Well, it's
be
like a societal agreement that we have that failing is bad,
right.
and we can just change that, because it's not the truth. It's just a story we've been telling ourselves.
Failing is bad and that life is unforgiving. Mother Nature is unforgiving. I'm not going to let go of Mother Nature now as a being. It's Mother Nature is forgiving, understanding. And as you're saying this, I'm gleaning so much. What are some of the miracles that you've seen from people being in nature? I'm asking you, John, because as you're saying this, and I'm pulling together your beautiful story in my mind about the AIDS epidemic and the pandemic and how distant we've become from ourselves and each other. It seems as though the solution truly is nature. So, what are some of
Yeah.
the biggest miracles that you've
Well,
seen
so this is
nature
another
work with
totally
people?
counterintuitive. So I was working with this organization called Green Corps Chicago. I work for the city of Chicago. We combined the job training program and the community gardening program. So we've trained people for coming out of prison and substance abuse programs for careers in the green industry. And the training ground was community gardens, churches, and schools and vacant lots. And we also gave them asbestos training and stuff like that. So I worked with the schools and I worked with these individuals to teach them various aspects of landscaping. And I was talking about landscape design and the idea of scale, and that we were going to do it in a 1/8 inch equals 1 foot. And they looked at me with blank stares. And I realized that these grown men didn't understand fractions in any way, shape, or form. And that I had to try to explain what a fraction was before I could even begin to teach them garden design. So I was using a pie and a clock and every metaphor I could to get them to understand the concept of a half, a quarter, an eighth. And I felt like I just couldn't. I mean, the whole entire session was only on that, and we never even got to like what I needed to talk about. Fast forward like a few months, and it's toward the end of the session for them, and this guy comes in the room and says, John, I'm like, what? It's like, I got it. I'm like, what are you talking about? I got it. It's like 1/8, 1/2 equals 1/4 equal 1/8 equal 1/32. It's like, I got it. I understand fractions. I'm like, it was such a good feeling. And that came from like working with plants, like to get the guy to have this aha around like something that we all take for granted as a skill. It was really, that was really moving. And another one, a woman was taking a pruning class of mine at a nature center in downtown Chicago along the park, in Lincoln Park. And she took the train from her house, which, was quite an effort. And she's, in her 80s. And at the end of the class, she says, well, it was a lovely class. I learned to see. And the whole class cracked up. And she's like, no, I mean it. I see the whole world differently. I drive on the train and I look at what they're doing out there and I think, oh my God, what are they doing to those plants? And it's just, I have such a deeper appreciation for all of nature. And it was just like, oh my God, like you don't think about who you're impacting. I have this phrase that you don't have any idea who you're impacting or how many people you're impacting by the things you do, but that you make an impact is undeniable. So just open to the fact that like people are listening to what you say and they're paying attention. So that idea of like being relevant, like talk about what matters, because people, that's what people want to hear.
John, that is the perfect place to wrap up our discussion today. Talk about what matters. That right there, as you referred to relevance, I can't think of a better definition. Thank you for leaving us with that. Where can people learn more about you and the work that you do?
Okay, so my website is beaudrydesign.com, and then there's also communitygreen.net, just like it sounds, communitygreen.net. And soon there will be the Beaudry School of Design.
I'll make sure that all of those links are in the liner notes of the episode. John, thank you for being here today and reconnecting us, giving us access to reconnecting with ourselves and one another through nature.
Thank you very much for helping take this conversation forward and getting it out there. That's the answer. I really appreciate you.
This conversation with John is a true testament to the power of nature, connection, and purpose. From his deeply personal journey to his groundbreaking work in green urban design, John has shown us that when we nurture the world around us, we in turn are nurtured right back. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep growing, keep connecting, and keep magnifying your message in the way only you can do. I'll see you on the next episode. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with everyone that you feel it would benefit. Thank you in advance. And when you're ready to share your story and your work with the world, I can help. Visit CherylHunter.com to learn how. I am Cheryl Hunter, and until next time, know that your message has the power to change the world.